In Hong Kong, he observed a little girl outside a bakery window. Can we show the next slide there? This isn't it, but she had fallen asleep with her head pressed against the window that separated her from the fresh bread and goodies inside, and he took pictures of that scene. When sharing it in a slide presentation when he got home to his congregation, the pastor always climaxed his sermon with that picture and an appeal to share Christ, the living bread, with a hungry world. Following one presentation, one of his worshipers asked him, "What did you do about it?" "About what?" the preacher asked. "What did you do about the little girl asleep at the bakery window? What did you do about that?" There's no answer recorded. To many people, hunger is when dinner is just a little late, causing us slight discomfort. But in our world, 1 billion people live in a state of absolute poverty. And of that number, the best estimates are that 795 million people live in a state of constant hunger. In a world that, according to experts, has enough grain so that each and every person could have 3,000 calories every single day. Around 70% of those who are hunger are farmers, and women suffer from hunger disproportionately, as they make up about 43% of the agricultural labor in developing countries. For these hundreds of millions, hunger might be just a half-full bowl of food once a day, if they're lucky. 20 million people die each year from starvation or hunger-related diseases, and 12 million of those are children under the age of 5. If all the world's hungry were lined up, holding hands a yard apart, they would circle the earth 25 times. Those are startling statistics. They're saddening. What can we do about that? What can we do about world hunger? In our passage today from Mark, we read about people, the disciples, wondering what to do about people who are hungry. But we don't hear how long the people had been following Jesus, but his disciples knew they were hungry. They saw a very clear problem. They didn't have enough food to feed the people who were there. Excuse me. Their solution? Send them away. Let them take care of themselves. And we do that. We turn our back. We look away. We send them away. We don't want to look at people who are hungry. If we're walking down the street, we avert our gaze, look in a different direction. When it comes on, we change the channel. We don't want to look at children who are emaciated. We don't want to have to do anything about it. The disciples, well, they went to Jesus. Surely Jesus would have a solution. We're going to push it off on Jesus. And we do that. We say, oh, our city should do something. Or our governments, they should step in. Our governments should do something. They'll have a solution. But what does Jesus say to his disciples? You give them something to eat. Not what they wanted to hear. Certainly not what we would want to hear. Me? You want me to give them something to eat? Look at all these people. And their response was, we don't have enough. We don't have enough money. We don't have enough food. Don't we do the same thing? Listening to the statistics I gave you this morning, what's our first response? What can I possibly do about this? Me? You want me to do something? I don't have enough. to feed all the hungry people in the world? And that's when Jesus asks them to focus on what they do have. Jesus asks them, how many loaves do you have? Jesus is asking them to turn their focus onto what they do have rather than what they don't. And we know the results. Not only was everyone fed, but there was an abundance left over. They worked together with Christ to alleviate hunger. The Bible speaks to us about our moral obligation and challenges us to be more actively involved in doing that in our world, working together with Christ to alleviate hunger. Each and every one of us can become personally involved. Each and every one of us should become personally involved. Feeding the world's hungry demands our personal involvement. But the question we struggle with, what can one person or even one church do about it? I want to share with you a story of a friend of mine. His name is John Bortman. In Carluke, there were 2 bakeries at either end. Mine was the little tiny one. John and his wife Ellie's was the really big one. They had a huge factory that made all the English muffins and pancakes for McDonald's in Canada. It was a really big bakery. And they were incredible supporters of the food banks in Hamilton and other charities. And while they never explicitly said anything to me, they were very quiet about it. I know that they donated literally millions of dollars to charity, much of it going to feed those who are hungry. John remembered growing up in Holland and being hungry. But it's what John did when he retired that I want to tell you about. When he retired, John had a little building erected out behind his house, and he put a little bakery in it. And every morning, John would go out and he would bake. He would bake bread, 30, 40, 50 loaves of bread every day. And he'd take it down to the shelter, to the food bank, to give to somebody who was hungry. John said, it's a small thing, but I feel that I am making a difference. It wasn't the grand gestures that were important to him, but the fact that in some small way that he felt that he was personally involved. We work with community care and with Niagara Nutrition Partners. It's wonderful, but it's just the tip of the iceberg. It's one way that we can make a difference, but it's not the only way. It's not going to solve all our problems. Reverend David Beckman is president of Bread for the World, an organization that speaks to world hunger. He's a minister and an economist. He's written books and articles, and one of the things he writes is, we cannot food bank our way to the end of hunger. We can't food bank our way to the end of hunger. God didn't send Moses into Pharaoh's court to set up a collection of canned goods, but rather to insist on political change, societal change, to set the people free, to make a difference. Political change, changing our government's thinking on poverty and hunger, changing how our society thinks about poverty and hunger. That's where we come in. Governments aren't going to do it without some prompt from us. And yes, there are some who will say, well, we have to reduce our deficit. But to quote David Beckman again, our leaders need to reduce the deficit, but it's not necessary and it's not right to reduce the deficit on the backs of poor people at the expense of people who can't speak up for themselves. That's where we come in. Christians have the ability and the resources to relieve world hunger. Christians working together can make a difference in our world. I know sometimes it seems overwhelming when we hear those statistics, and it just makes us stop in our tracks and go, and we get upset, but we don't know what to do. We think that it couldn't possibly make a difference. But there's a proverb in a Swahili tribe that says, drop by drop, the bucket fills. What one person or one church does can seem like a drop in the bucket, but drop by drop, the bucket fills. Canadians are trying to make a difference. One article I read says Canada has been a global leader in food security in the past. However, Canadian aid is at the lowest it has been in 50 years, contributing only 0.26% of its gross national income by helping the world's poorest citizens, well below the average of similar countries, which is almost double at 0.54%. Working together, Christians can make a difference. PWS&D, the Canadian Food Grains Bank that we have supported, they are supported by Canadian Christian churches. And they provided $41 million of assistance for over 900,000 people in 35 countries. But you heard my statistics. It's still a drop in the bucket. Just the tip of the iceberg. But hear our second passage again. They have freely scattered their gifts to the poor. Their righteousness endures forever. They, a group of people, freely scattering, freely sharing what they have. We, a group of caring, compassionate Christians, freely sharing what we have. How many loaves do you have? We have abundant bread. We have so much, and we are called to share it. We all know that you can't be close to God if we are turning our back on God's children, on those that hunger. Advocacy for hungry people is our response to the gospel. Jeffrey Sachs is the director of the UN's Millennium Project, which has the goal of cutting the world's extreme poverty. In his book entitled The End of Poverty, he discusses how we can make it happen. He writes, "We can banish extreme poverty in our generation, yet 8 million people die each year because they are too poor to survive. The tragedy is that with a little help, they could even thrive. With a little help, one person, one more drop in the bucket. How can we, each and every one of us, make a difference, even a small one?" That's the question, isn't it? What can one person do to eradicate hunger? In the narthex, foyer, whatever you want to call that, there's a piece of paper that has 10 suggestions. It's entitled, "How Can One Person Make a Difference?" There are 10 items listed, and these were ones that I found online. Some require hardly any time at all. Some just a little more time. Some require no money. Some just a little. Some just a little more. But each of these can make a difference to those who are hungry. You give them something to eat, Jesus says. These were his words to his disciples back then. And it's his words to us, his disciples, now. In sharing what we have, we are realizing God's work in our world. We are fulfilling Jesus' encouragement that comes to us in Matthew 25. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me. Truly, I tell you, whatever you did for the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. The word of the Lord. Amen. Let's sing together, I heard the voice of Jesus say.